Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. This is Hito Singh, and we got a bit of a banger of a video today. AT Ray is out, and his armor set is absolutely amazing. I absolutely love it, and there's so many fun, interesting, useful, and just fun things you can do with it, really. I'm sorry for repeating fun so much. I want to talk a little bit about this set and some of my goals when I'm creating these builds. So if you're just interested in the highest damage build that we just came up with, you can feel free to jump to that in the timestamp. It'll be right after the intro. When I make a build, I am looking to stack as much damage as humanly possible to get the largest numbers I can on screen. For example, my maxed out build right now, I can do Helmbreakers where I get about 160 per tick is the max I've seen, and that's with like a hunting horn buff and all that stuff, but consistently in the 150s. I'm Hito Singh, the damage king. I love to see large numbers. That's my goal, but that's not necessarily the highest DPS damage per second when it comes to builds, especially the types that speedrunners are going to run, where they're going to focus much more on doing as many crit hits as possible generally, whereas mine, the crit hit rates are going to be very comparable, but I'm looking to stack as many damage inducing skills as humanly possible into my builds, to just get really juicy numbers, because that's the way I like to get down. I was just kind of explaining it to my wife. I feel like there's a certain level of build creation that's good for newer players that are very comfy, have defensive skills, things like that. And then at the end of the spectrum, there's these builds tailor-made for speedrunners and specific fights that might not be very good overall for not an average player, but someone that's moved beyond having a build for comfort and really now wants to go at these monsters and get some huge damage and just have fun with that, but not quite have such the optimization as a speedrunning type build. But we're going to go over all of it. So again, thanks for joining me today. This is going to be a little bit of a lengthier video, but feel free to use all the timestamps to go to everything that's relevant. I'm going to try to label the timestamps so they're very clear about that. Also, if you're interested to finding just some really amazing people and hunters to game with, in the link in the description will be a link to our Discord Zero Faints. It's just a name. We don't expect perfection. You can ask me more about that, why I named it that group, and we can have that discussion, because it's way more about just having fun with this game and becoming an awesome hunter. And truly, this game is transcendent when you play with other people. But enough yakking, let's get to the gist of this video. Okay, let's get into these builds. Just like every other title update, we generally end up with the options to build for maximum agitator or maximum weakness exploit, with pros and cons for both. So that's what we're going to do with this set, and this is going to revolve around the 3-piece set bonus for the Arc Tempered Rey set, and that's going to give us this new skill, brand new skill, Lord Soul Guts Tenacity, whatever you want to call it. Basically, you start off the fight with a 5% attack boost increase. That's reflective of your raw on your weapon, and in this case, on our Ardian rolls, we're going to have the maximum 225 with the 1 sharpness roll, all that good stuff. That's a 11.25 increase to your attack raw. It's wonderful, and you have that unless you A, cart, or B, take a hit that would have made you cart, because in many situations you'll be left with 1 HP, but you lose your attack boost and gain some defense boost. But I'm sure you know about this skill watching other videos and describing them, but we're mainly concerned about that 5% attack boost, because what we want to do is stack damage. So let's go with the agitator build first. Alright, I know this build is going to look a little weird to you just by looking at it with no weakness exploit, but we're going to get to how you're going to use this build, because this build really smacks some teeth in. It's quite wonderful. Let's start off with the build, of course. We're going to use the Zoshia helm instead of the Raydao Gamma helmet. It is a nice piece, don't get me wrong, but it is, to me, in my opinion, kind of less than this piece, because you have this 1 extra slot, and for a longsword we definitely want our quick sheath in there. So many other builds you might not need to put this piece in there, but for a longsword, if you want to set up a 3-piece ATRD, this is going to be very useful. And then we're going to use the Rey Gamma chest that gives us our 3 levels of latent power, and at 1 slot for another quick sheath. We're going to use the braces, which are quite wonderful for many different builds. It gives you a lot of flexibility because you have 2 level 3 slots, and the 2 skills that come with an evade extender are just super, super useful. This build actually has Zoshia's super recovery and evade extender, so not only does it hit like a truck, it is super comfortable too, which is very, very rare for when you're looking at the higher spectrum of damage builds. Generally, they don't have this much comfort. Then you have this waist piece, which is really flexible in many different builds too. It's very awesome. It has no decoration slots, which kind of sucks. But you get 2 Latent Power, which is 2 level 3 skills, and 2 Maximum Might, which is 2 level 2 skills. So you have 2 level 3s and 2 level 2s in one piece. And that 20% Latent Power level 2 comes in handy in a lot of different builds, even if you're not running this set. And then for the legs, we're actually going to use the Zoshia Alpha legs because we want that 1 slot for the quick sheath, our final quick sheath. But it comes with 2 levels of counter strike, so we can add the other counter strike in the level 2. I generally like to use the counter strike talisman because it's just, to me, my opinion, the best, most efficient talisman. However, the other option was to use the Jin Dahad legs for the 2 agitator and get another quick sheath in the level 2, and then I would have my counter charm 3. But that's a downgrade to this because at least now I get the super recovery as well. So I wasn't really aiming to have the super recovery, but for this set it just comes with it and it's quite wonderful. Plus you're going to have 2 levels of recovery up. So this is how we're going to get this build. This is how we're going to get this stats. And now let's describe this, because just looking at it, you're not going to get a full understanding. So I'm going to describe it, and then I'm going to show it in action. Okay, first let's talk about the damage stacking that's going to happen on this build. You're going to have the 11.25 that we talked about before. We're going to round that down to 11. You're going to have 20 from your agitator. That's 31. You're going to have 25 from your counter strike. That's 56. And then you're going to have 10 from your adrenaline rush, and that's 66. So you have the potential to stack 66 raw on this build, which is like 3 more than any other build we could previously do, including the Peppo, Tuzo, 2 Gormagala set. That was 63, I believe. Alternatively, you can use Burst instead of that counterattack right here. I just wanted to test to get the highest damage ticks I could for like Helmbreakers and my R2 triangles and things like that. So I used the Adrenaline Rush. It is plus 10, whereas the burst is plus 8. However, the burst is active more during the fight, so in all intents and purposes, it will probably be more useful for you. However, also, I'm really good at my Foresight slashes. So as soon as I see Adrenaline Rush wear off, I am immediately looking to Foresight to get it right back active again, and I generally have that up most of the fight. So I'm considering keeping it this way, but you could probably get more DPS actually with the burst, especially when you have situations in knockdown after knockdown or blue wound and paralysis and traps where you don't have the opportunity to proc your adrenaline rush. Burst is probably going to be the best, but like I said, I want to see the highest damage ticks I can, so I'm kind of running it with this for now. So this is why this is the highest damaging set. Once you get your, we're going to get to 100% affinity, and that's the next segment. I want to explain how we're going to do that and how it's accomplished with this build. But that's the damage that we're looking to stack, 66 raw, and it is not too difficult to do. In every other build that we've had to use, we did have to stack our adrenaline rush and our counter strike. If you take away the adrenaline rush and do burst, burst is just active by hits. The only thing you really have to do is get your counter strike active, and as we've discussed many times before with the longsword and all the moves that it has hyper armor, especially in red gauge, that's not a problem to do. So it's really easy to kind of keep all this damage up and running and be able to stack that 66 raw and keep it active. Okay, let's talk about the affinity. Okay, so you're looking at this and you're like, wow, no Wex, no instant, like what am I doing in the beginning of a fight? I'm sitting there with what? Maximum might 30 and the 5 of my weapon, 35 base affinity. Like, this is terrible. Why would I ever consider this? First things first, we're going to learn how to proc latent power within a minute, and it's not too difficult, and there are ways you can proc it much faster with bombs and other techniques, but this is going to be a really useful way just for anybody to proc latent power with a longsword within about a minute of the fight. So we'll get to that in just a second. Now we're going to have our 35 that we just talked about, but we're actually going to make that 45 with our corrupted mantle. And so in the beginning of the fight, we're going to only have 45 until latent power is active. We're going to have 95 agitator above. We're going to overclock, and it's going to be beautiful. The other thing to consider is we're longsword people. In the beginning of a fight, we are gaining meter. We're getting to red gauge. So it's not as important to have as much affinity right in the beginning of a fight. You're doing kind of less hits, and it's more like, you know, getting your ISS, getting your foresights, getting all your skills procced. So you're going to see, by the time the fight begins, by the time we get into red gauge, once we get into red gauge, everything's going to start clicking, and things are going to start happening after that. Oh, one other point I want to make. So we're going to activate latent power within a minute, right? So we're going to also utilize this skill, Rey Set's voltage, because we do have 3 pieces. So at 2 pieces, it extends the latent power's duration from 2 minutes to 2.5 minutes. So in essence, we're looking at, in the first 3.5 minutes of the fight, we're looking at about 70% uptick of latent power, you know, and that's just the first 3.5 minutes. We'll go on to talk about what happens afterwards. But even if there was no change in that, and it was just that amount of time, you're looking at roughly about 70% activation of this throughout the entire fight, given you know what you're doing, of course. Okay, so latent power activated, nice. How do we accomplish this quickly? We're going to use our corrupted mantle. We're going to put on the corrupted mantle in the beginning of the fight. It's going to drain our health to a certain point. As we are going to use our skills to proc our counter strike and our adrenaline rush, especially the counter strike, because you're going to use hyper armor, you're going to take damage from that. So you're going to end up taking enough damage from your corrupted mantle and getting some damage from your counter strike and hyper armor to proc latent power very quickly. So by the time you get into red gauge, you're going from 45% affinity to 95% affinity. And this is great. 95% affinity, you actually have all your skills procced at that time. Your counter strike and your adrenaline rush, you are sitting at the 66 increase in raw at 95% affinity within 1 minute of the fight. Tell me that ain't great. Tell me that ain't great. Now, I know this is skill dependent, but this is the purpose of these builds. These aren't the beginner comfy builds. These are the builds that once you get comfortable with your weapon and the monsters and you're looking to do some hurting on these things, this is when we start to do these things, okay? Now, after that amount of time, you know, let's say the monster is in agitation. You actually are looking at 110% affinity. You're overclocked. It's fine. You don't have to worry about doing anything with that. We want our agitator 20 raw, you know? What usually happens by the time latent power deactivates is generally you go through your agitation cycle where you gain agitation on the monster and maybe lose it. And then after latent power has deactivated, one of 2 things is usually reactivating. Either your agitator, which will get you back up to 50% affinity, but often it's your latent power. And one thing I'm not 100% sure of is I don't know if the damage you need to reproc latent power after you already have it, if that is building up while your latent power is still active. I don't think so, but between re-aggravating the monster, which generally happens shortly after latent power unprocs, and reprocking your latent power, between those aspects, you're never as low as affinity as you were in the beginning of the fight. But at the end of the day, I'm averaging about 75 to 80% affinity throughout the fight, sometimes more if I'm a little bit faster, and I can especially get my counter strike active and take some of those hyper armor damage, especially on a large move like a big blast where I can use my spirit release and watch 2/3, you know, 50% or more of my life bar go away. I'm happy about that now because it's activating my latent power. This build really does hit like a truck. It really, really does. And really, that's about it. Once you have 75 to 80% affinity throughout a fight, that's kind of your magic number. If you really wanted to, you could run Master's Touch on this build. Master's Touch is good. I believe our friend Dreaming Suntide, well, he's not my friend. I don't really know him, but I love his content. Figured it out that anything above 73% affinity, it's good to run Master's Touch. I still don't, mainly because I want to run my Razor Sharp's Handicraft Deco because in the beginning of the fight, I am going to be very low on affinity. And I don't want to lose too much sharpness in the beginning of the fight where it might become an issue where I might have to sharpen later in the fight. So personally, I like to run Razor Sharp Handicraft for that specific reason. So let's go in the training room and let's show some damage numbers that when you accumulate with these things, and let me show you exactly how to proc this Latent Power. Actually, let's do the Latent Power first. Okay, this is how we're going to proc Latent Power within a minute. I do it about 52 seconds on this run, but it's generally give or take about a minute depending on what the monster does. We immediately put on our Corrupted Mantle, and I know for speedrunning purposes or other purposes it might not be the best use of the mantle and the damage outcome of it, but it's the affinity I want and the health drain because it's draining my health as soon as I put it on. And I will go ahead and use like a Mega Potion before I get to the monster to get my health back. But the health that it depleted is counting towards activating Latent Power. You can still get your sneak attacks in on the monster, just kind of approach from behind so he doesn't immediately see you, so you don't have to have your Ghillie Mantle. And then I'm going to do my opener. I'm going to proc Adrenaline Rush on the screen. And then I'm going to do an ISS. Often I get Counter-Strike here, but I didn't this time, but I got my Latent Power. And here goes my Counter-Strike. Everything is proc, 95% affinity, 345 raw. This is pretty amazing. Also, this is an amazing build to actually fight AT Rey with. You have 16 base thunder resistance plus with the elemental absorption and some things like my pills and powders and food. My elemental resistance is huge. You got 2 evade extender to roll out of the way of the blast radius of his lightning and super recovery plus the affinity and damage. This is just a wonderful build to actually farm AT Rey with. If you thought that was great, let me blow your mind here for a minute because that clip of 345 for the raw did not include the agitation. The monster wasn't agitated, so it would have been 20 raw on top of that. That's 365 raw plus the 15% affinity, of course. But that's not all either. You can even get it higher if you are running with a hunting horn. Basically, I had my Mega Demon Drugs, my Demon Powder, and my Might Seed, but I didn't have any kind of hunting horn buffs. Zoe likes to run the War Conga with the Resounding Galahad, so we can actually do like the affinity and attack bubbles and songs and the attack boost large, which could add crazy damage. But one thing you can do if you're running specifically with a Resounding Galahad, or you just don't care to maybe just sharpen one extra time during the fight, you can use your 2 sharpness boost Ardean weapon with the 3 attacks and the rest max attack. This allows you to build for attack boost 5 and crit boost 3. So now your base raw is 237 instead of 225. That's an additional 12. That would be on top of the agitation as well. So that would be what, 365? 279 before any hunting horn buffs, and that can approach and probably get to 400 raw with some clever uses of a hunting horn. This build can be extremely powerful, and I don't think any other build is going to be able to approach those raw numbers, really come anywhere close. The build is all predicated on managing your latent power, and this can be done. If this is done early, the fights will not last long enough for multiple proccings of agitating and latent power to be necessary. Maybe one extra of one of the other after the initial latent power has exceeded, and then you're good. You're good for the rest of the fight. Like I said, I can get Rey in about 8. With a little bit of more knowledge of the fight and just playing him more, I've only fought him maybe a dozen times because I've been making content. I can get that at 7, and I think I can really, if I push it, get that down to about 6, and this is the build I'm going to use to accomplish that, or attempt to accomplish that. All right, let's go to the other end of the spectrum here, and let's talk about using the Arc-Tempered Rey bonus with a full-on max weakness exploit build. And one thing we really want to talk about in this build is we're going to get our Quick Sheath with the regular Rey beta piece, and this is going to give us Rey Dow's voltage, but the level 2 for the 4-piece. So instead of having latent power only active for 2.5 minutes with the 2-piece, with the 4-piece it's going to be 3.5 minutes. This is going to be really important. A lot of speedrunners are starting to toy with this build, well, not this specific build, but using the ATRD 3-piece set bonus max with weakness exploit, usually with 3 levels of latent power. Depending on the fight or the monster, they might adjust, the adrenaline rush and the burst and things like that, but it's going to be a very similar build to this, and they're experimenting using the high 5% additional damage with your counter strike and things like that. It's a wonderful build. There's nothing bad to say about this build. In fact, if I didn't start developing the other build, this is the build I would definitely be using. But just with toying with the other build, it's so much fun, and I think it's out damaging this build. But for speedrunning purposes and for DPS purposes, rather than seeing large number ticks, this is probably going to be more the way to go. Just because when you're able to do all those critical hits from the beginning of the fight, it's just really nice. It's just really nice. And we're going to build this with the Rey Gamma Helm this time. We don't need the single slot for the quick sheet. We're going to get it other ways. Put a Tenderizer Deco in there. We're going to use the Arc Vulcan chest this time. So you're going to get your weakness exploit from there, add another weakness exploit, and this is where we're going to put one level of quick sheet in a level 2 slot. Ugh, I hate it, but got to do it. The braces are the same, of course. We're going to use a counterattack and a burst deco, and then the last 2 slots for the beta on the Rey Dow, we're going to do quick sheet to get our quick sheet 3. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have significantly more crit hits. You're going to have 30% from your Wex, you're going to have 30% from your maximum might, that's 65 from the Affinity, that's 65, and once latent power activates, that's an additional 30, that's 95 right there. Plus when you have your Corrupted Mantle, as soon as you put that on, whether you do it late or early, that's an additional 10%. But in this build, I feel like it's best to do early, even if you don't want to use it to proc latent power specifically. Use it sometime earlier in the fight when you have lower affinity, so by time your latent power does proc, boom, it's just a wonderful use of damage and affinity, and it's great. It's a very wonderful build, and I would definitely consider using it. The only problem is I don't see it as so much more of an improvement as the previous builds we were using, whether it's the Peppo build with the 2-piece Soshia and the gore bonuses, or the Hiten Mitsurugi Ryu, which we were using, that has the agitator, the burst, the adrenaline rush, stacking all the different types of damage that way. I don't see this as a huge significant improvement, the Wex version, but this agitator version, played in the right hands, played basically manipulating your latent power, and you get that to the point where you're comfortable doing that, it far exceeds the Peppo build. It far exceeds the Hiten Mitsurugi build, in my opinion. You definitely have to learn how to optimize keeping your affinity and your damage as high as you can, but once you do, the numbers are gorgeous. Let's go in the training room here in just a second, but like I was saying, the max I've hit was about 160 per tick on a Helmbreaker, but that was with the Hunting Horn. I believe it was Zoe, actually. So if you're just using this on your own, let's show you what the numbers of both of these are going to look like. Let's look at the numbers here. First of all, I had my Mega Demon drugs and my might pills and all that good stuff, but no food skills or nothing other than the skills in the weapon. And I put my Corrupted Mantle on just to see how large I can get these numbers. This is the Wex build, and we're looking 140, 150, hit the wound for 170, 190, 70s on those secondary pops. I forgot to put the Corrupted Mantle on for the Helmbreaker test. It came out to be about 128, but I retested it, and it's about 135 to 138, so pretty nice, very comparable to other things that we've been doing. But the Agitator build is just so much better. So much better. Once I get my Adrenaline Rush procced, these are hitting, the wounds are in the 200s, 220s. The R2s are hitting for like 180. It's like 160 on the low end for the other hits, 180 on the high ends, 80s for the second hit of the triangle. It's a significantly more damaging combo now with the skills. Of course, like we've been talking about, it is predicated on your affinity. But yeah, it's so much noticeably higher damage that it just it excites the endorphins in me and creates those endorphins, and it makes me just happy to play the game even more. So, long story short, you have your Wex version. You're going to have comparable damage, just much longer, steady 130s, 150s, 160s. But then with your agitator, it's going to have a little bit of a peak valley. But when the peak hits, it's so much higher than the peak of pretty much any other build I've really played with in this game, that it's just making this game so much more enjoyable to be able to hit those damage levels. And whether this could be considered something for runners or not, I'll let them decide. But for you guys watching at home, if you are enjoying the game the same way I do, try this build out and you're going to have the time of your life. Okay, let's really wrap up. I got quite a few things coming up in the future. I want to talk a bit more about these tempered Rey 3-piece builds, how well they go with 2 pieces of Zoshia, Gore, a couple other things. Also, there's a few videos that I've been just meaning to get at. I just haven't been able to. The foray videos for the Blossom set and the mounting videos. All of that is coming. It's just kind of my busy season at work, so a little bit more time is taken away from that, and I want to get more into streaming, so my time is just a little split, but there's a lot more content coming up, a lot of fun I'm having with this game, and I want to show you guys all of this stuff. So if you liked or enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please like, comment, subscribe. That would be totally awesome. Check the description link for Zero Faint's Discord, and that's about it. See ya.